welcome back to the House of Man podcast. My name is Austin Worsk, and today I'm going to try to offer a little bit something more pertinent and practical as opposed to the previous podcasts and videos that I have made. This one is specifically about friends. We're talking about friends. How many of us have them? I'm talking about friends. Anyway, I'm gonna fucking leave that in there. But anyway, we're getting silly already. So, among the issues that men are dealing with today in the world is this constant feeling of loneliness. It is an ongoing issue that many people in general are dealing with, but men are most affected by loneliness. And it has to do with a lot of different factors, between just the way that men interact, the fact that social media takes over, and it's easy to feel like you're contributing to a friendship just by going onto Facebook or Twitter and just seeing somebody post something and not actively talk to them or anything. The fact that, our schedules have gotten so crazy and it feels like there's a million things that you have to do and you don't have time for friends, as well as the general fact that we have developed as societies in a direction that has been inherently anti-male, and a lot of things that men would be interested in doing are seen as harmful or even dangerous. So today we're going to kind of discuss some of those, or some ways that we can go ahead and reintroduce the skill of making friends, as well as some helpful advice that you can take in that direction. Making friends, learning how to make friends is a skill. It's not like some natural born gift that you have to be born with in order to be charismatic enough to get people to like you. It is a skill. It can be learned, and it is a meta skill. And for those of you that don't know, meta skills are skills that are basically overarching skills that can feed into other areas of your life. For instance, learning how to read is a meta skill, because if you know how to read, you can then learn a bunch of other things on top of that just through books. You can learn history, you can learn skills, you can learn how to fix your car, all of these other things. Learning martial arts, I would say, is another kind of meta skill, because it would teach you how to stand up for yourself, how to be used to being uncomfortable, how to handle pain in a way that doesn't inhibit you from being able to keep moving forward, and teaches you self-discipline and stuff like that. Other skills that are more specific, for instance, coding in or learning how to play, learning how to play saxophone. Learning to read music is a meta skill. Learning how to play saxophone specifically is not. Specific instruments and whatnot, they have less areas that they can translate into, but learning how to read music in general is a meta skill, because then you can learn how to read music for other instruments to learn how to play those. So that's just kind of the idea of meta skills. And learning how to make friends is probably one of the best meta skills that you can learn, because it's learning how to make friends is specifically learning how to start up and maintain relationships. A lot of the advice that I'm going to give, it's going to sound a little bit weird, but in reality, the only difference between friends and romantic partners is whether or not you have sex with them. That's literally the only difference. A lot of the same advice that I'm going to give is the same advice that you can use for starting up relationships with romantic relationships with members of the opposite sex, or with members of the same sex. I don't care if you're gay. Anytime that you are trying to start up a relationship where you are going beyond just general acquaintance, these skills apply. Um, Firstly, why do we need friends? As a social species, we are a species that requires social interaction in order to be able to survive and even thrive in the world. We have sacrificed many of the tools that other animals have with them, such as sharp claws, incredibly big muscle builds, um, large teeth, and whatnot. We've sacrificed those abilities for the ability to have higher thinking, as well as to be able to communicate with each other in complex ways. We basically evolved to be the ultimate in problem solving. As a species, that's probably one of the things that we have basically developed our entire biology around our mind, and to be able to look at complex problems and find solutions. And the way we do that the best is through communicating with other people and making those connections. It plays on the safety in numbers. The more people that you have, the more brains that you have working towards solving a specific problem, such as finding food, building shelters, fighting off monsters, the various wild beasts that would try to hunt us in our early days, and whatnot. So these are skills that require social interaction, and in order to have those strong social interactions, you need to be able to not only interact with the people around you in a positive way that makes them want to be around you more, but also to be able to trust them enough that you would be willing to take them at their word and not feel like you are going to get screwed over. One of the biggest reasons why social circles for men have dropped is because we have developed a low trust society. It doesn't feel like you can really trust your neighbor as much as, people, 40 years ago could have. I know growing up, my parents always tried to make sure that they were friends with their neighbors, and we would invite them over for barbecues and stuff like that. But then basically once I hit high school, that didn't happen as often. And then, moving out, I almost never talked to my neighbors. I had one... For 1 year, we lived in a duplex, and we actually got to know our neighbors pretty well. We became friendly with them. If we would have stayed, or if they would have stayed and we would have stayed there longer, we probably would have actually became very close friends. But I would say that that's the exception and not the rule. We've all become too atomized, and it's become easier to find people who are exactly like us online, so we don't have to make the compromises in certain behaviors or in certain viewpoints. Instead of having to worry about whether or not I can get along with my neighbor who might be incredibly nice, but they might have political views that I don't like, or they might have interests that I'm not super big in. I can go online and find the exact type of people that would basically be like me. And that's what I'm hoping that I can help you pull away from. Because the other thing that friends do is they call you on your bullshit. It's probably one of the most important things to have a good friend that you can trust, is somebody who can sit there and you can tell them about your idea and they'll turn around and immediately be like, well, are you going to do that idea? And instead of being like, oh, that's a great idea, I think you're so smart and you can do it, they'll turn around and be like, look, you've come to me with these ideas several times and I have yet to see you follow through on one of them, so I'm calling you out on it. You going to follow through on that idea, or are you just telling me this thing and then you're going to go ahead and play video games and not even bother with this? They can really help you, get back on track and keep you from doing anything stupid. There's been several times where I've had ideas in my head and been called out because I never followed through. There's been times where I've had ideas and I share them, and immediately one of my friends, God damn it, I always pick the worst days to record. Anyway, we're going to ignore the yard work going outside my apartment here pretty soon. That will not be an issue. But anyway, I've had ideas and claims, and I've had people go, "No, that's a really stupid idea. I can't believe you said that," kind of thing. And I'm like, "Oh, okay," and then I dialed it back. They keep you from going off the edge and becoming radicalized. They keep you from because you have to compromise. You have to compromise some of your beliefs and your ideas in order to maintain social cohesion. But the only way that works is with absolute trust that other person isn't going to use it against you, or isn't going to stop you from doing something. It's one thing to go over to your friend and say, "Hey, I have this book idea, and I think I'm gonna get started." And they go, "Well, are you really gonna do that? Because you've come to me with 30 book ideas and you haven't done it. It sounds like a good idea. I want to see you actually work on this," kind of thing. There's a difference between somebody being like, calling you out to get you actually to do the thing that you say you're going to do, and somebody calling you out because they don't think you're smart enough, and or they just really don't want you to succeed. They feel like you're going to abandon them if you start succeeding. So, friends are essential. And I really want to help men start forming those friendships again. Get those brotherhoods started where you feel like you have that close connection with another man that you can trust them with your life, and they'll have your back in under the worst conditions and whatnot. So that way, together, you both, or all of you, however big your friend group is, all of you can rise up and take on the world. Plus, learning how to make friends is incredibly useful when you have to move away from your current friend group, and it can make you feel more confident with getting out of your comfort zone, because you know that you can immediately start up new friendships and build a new social circle should everything fall apart, or should you have to move away to where it's difficult to maintain those previous relationships. Ideally, it shouldn't matter the distance that you are from somebody, you can still maintain that strong friendship bond. But sometimes things happen. So the steps to making friends, and I've done some research on this. I found some good articles. I couldn't find it again, but I've seen a few others that said similar things. Starting a relationship with anybody, there's kind of a step-by-step process, and it's all about feeling each other out on a social level, and just kind of gauging where the lines are, and kind of gauging how much you can trust the person, and slowly pushing those limits until you are finally comfortable enough with that person for anything. So, for instance, you don't go up to a girl that you're interested in romantically and immediately, tell them, "Hey, my name is Austin, and I think we should sleep together." That is the fastest way to get a rejection, and probably the cops called on you. You actually have to work at it. You have to build up that trust. You have to build up that rapport before you can actually get that girl interested in you. You don't walk up to somebody and just be like, "Hey, will you marry me?" That's just never going to happen. Friendships do require commitment, and it is, in today's day and age, it is difficult for people to be comfortable with committing to somebody. So you got to build up that trust. You got to build up that rapport. So very, very first step is you have to be willing to put yourself out there. This is the hardest step, and this is where the majority of the failure is going to come out. You're going to walk up to somebody and you're going to introduce yourself, and they may just be like, "I don't know you. I don't know why you're talking to me." But the only way you're going to make new friends is if you are actively going out to people to introduce yourself and to talk with people. That means getting away from the computer, getting off of your phones. and you have to be willing to be rejected. This is literally where the worst case scenario is they just say no. The other side of this is the benefits of having the friends, actually developing that long-term friendship is way, way higher than the downside of putting yourself out there and being rejected. It is, it hurts when you go up to somebody and you try to start a friendship. Throughout my entire time, from elementary school all the way up through high school, I struggled with making close friends. I would try to make friends with other kids, and I actually struggled a lot. I didn't struggle too much in like kindergarten, but basically first grade on, it was difficult for me to make friends. I would try to start up that big friendship with one of the kids in my class, and they didn't seem to like me. That being said, I got used to the whole thing with rejection, and for me, it's not that scary to just walk up to somebody and talk to them. For me, it gets scary when I actually start trying to develop that friendship because I have been burned a couple times. So that's an area that I would be working on personally. But I will have plenty of opportunities after my move. So what you need to do is you need to put yourself out there. Easiest ways to do that is either start talking to people at your job, because this is mostly geared towards adults, or in your university classes. Just find somebody who looks friendly enough, who seems interesting, who you might be interested in starting a relationship with, and actually talk to them and just say, hey, my name's Austin, and have some small talk. Obviously, use your own name. I do not know who you are, good listener. But, go up to them and introduce yourself. And, have some small talk. Talk about the weather, talk about the game that happened the previous night. Just kind of gauge out the interest. Figure out what you are interested in. And, bring those up. But you want to focus on what they're interested in. It's an area that's a little bit difficult. A lot of people prefer to talk about themselves. And when you do that, you sound like you're, very, very self-indulged and a little bit conceited, and you don't really care about them. It starts to seem like you're just using them. So what you want to do is you want to give a little bit of information and coax out a little bit more information from them. Ask them what they're interested in. Ask them what sports teams they like. Ask them what movies they like. Ask them what games they play. Ask them questions and actively listen to what their response is. Because the next part is you have to start remembering. If somebody is receptive to you and is willing to talk to you about their interests, you need to remember what they say. If you forget, then that shows that you weren't listening, and that shows that you don't really care. But if you remember little details, obviously not too little, you don't want to remember creepy things. You don't want to seem like you're, taking notes on them. But, if they say, hey, I'm really into, Overwatch, and they mention that their favorite character is, I don't play enough Overwatch. I say their favorite character is D.Va because they, like the fact that they have this big bulky armor, tank character. And when that goes down, they basically get a second life instead of, immediately getting killed. So, just remember that they like D.Va because, she's a tank character and they like to play tanks. You don't have to remember every little detail, but you remember that thing and they'll be like, oh, wow, you were listening. Remember those details. Another area that you can meet somebody at is in social clubs. Specifically social events. You can find them up on, an app called Meetup. I've used that to find D&D games because I'm somebody who enjoys playing D&D. And, it's a very, very easy way to meet people in a social setting where, the idea is actually to meet people. And you're basically guaranteed to get somebody who has similar interests because you will have picked out a group based on your own interests. If you're really, really into fantasy football, you will find a fantasy football group and you will join them. And then you'll know for sure that everybody around there enjoys talking about football. You're like me, you're into D&D. You go into a D&D group, everybody there is a bunch of nerds, and they're going to talk about rules and characters and storylines and crazy shit that they've done in their imaginations. So those are kind of like the two main areas. Of course, you can always meet somebody on the street. Just know that has a bit more high risk, and it's a lot more random as to whether or not you're going to mesh with them. Think about the type of people that you enjoy hanging out with. And try to branch out a little bit from that, just because you don't want to find somebody who's exactly like you. You want to find somebody kind of in a relationship that you can build up off of, that can help you get more, gain more experiences. You can learn new things. You can discover things. You can meet somebody who's really into Thai food and you've never had Thai food, and they invite you over for some lunch or to a Thai restaurant, and you try it and you discover that you absolutely love it. You want to build out a diverse, and I know that word has many different connotations now, but in the actual sense of, individuals who have different lives, not, different skin colors, or not just different skin colors. Should specify that. There's nothing wrong with being friends with people outside of your own race. But you want people who have different experiences, so that way you can, build up off of each other and actually add to each other's lives. So yeah, you go out and you develop that diverse friends group, so that way you all have a bunch of different interests, as well as common interests, that, kind of act as like the glue that keeps your friend group together. Where was I going? Okay, so yeah, find people on Meetup. Find people at your work, at your university. Those areas, you might not find people who have the same interests as you, but at the very least, that they're in the same situation as you, and they probably have closer to similar schedules as you. Meetup groups, that gets a little bit tricky when it comes to scheduling. Ideally, everybody would have similar schedules, because you schedule, you go to the same meetup at the same time, but sometimes it's like the one day a week that they have that they can go there, and they don't have any other time available. So keep that in mind. Schedules do kind of interfere with your ability to make friends. Once you have started up the small talk and you have started learning little bits of information about them, open up a little bit more. Say that this is the third or fourth time you meet them. Mention some slightly more personal stuff. You don't have to go too hard. If you open up immediately and you tell them the most embarrassing story that has occurred to you, that can very quickly, turn somebody away. People don't want your whole life story, that early. But, you can mention something about how, like, yeah, I don't get along with my dad too well. Kind of thing. Or, unfortunately, my grandfather died of cancer, and that happened 3 years ago, and it still bugs me, kind of thing. Just open up a little bit. You don't have to go into detail, but if they're receptive to you, they'll go ahead and they'll do the pleasantries and their condolences for something tragic like that. But then they might share something about themselves, how you mentioned your grandfather passed away from cancer, and you took it a little bit hard, and they might mention, my mom is currently going through breast cancer right now. Her prognosis looks good, but it's really scary. And again, you need to remember that, remember that their mom is not doing well. That's a good sign that things are going in the right direction if they're opening up about their lives as well. And they remember your stories. For instance, going back to the Overwatch thing, you remember that they like playing as D.Va. They remember that you like playing as Sombra or Black Widow, because you like being the sniper. And none of this has to do with anything about the character model designs and, how attractive these fictional characters are. You go ahead and you remember these little details, and you bring them up as you interact with them. Open up a little bit more. They should open up more in return. And you start, sharing more and more details about each other's lives. Invite them out to a little bit more personal things. Invite them to see a movie or watch a movie that you really enjoy. One of the websites, or one of the articles that I saw, like I said, this was kind of referring it back to how friendships and intimate relationships are almost identical. The only difference is whether or not you're going to have sex. And I highly recommend against having sex with your friends. That's something that's deeply personal, and I am somebody who believes in monogamy, and you should save that for individuals, or for the individual that you actually are wanting to spend your life with, and not just sleep around with everybody. But that being said, what they say is they use the adage that is used for weddings. It's at a wedding you want something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. I think that's the adage. I'm not entirely sure why blue is in there, other than for the fact that it rhymes. But for something old, you want to bring up something that is a classic hobby of yours, or a classic or a favorite old movie, something that you grew up with, and you want to share that with them. So for instance, one of my favorite movies is V for Vendetta, and I might invite somebody over to watch that movie, or ask if they want to have a movie night, and I can show them this movie, or even Princess Bride. It's another fantastic movie that I like. Something new, ask them if they want to go try something new that you haven't done before. I am somebody who's genuinely interested in maybe taking some dance classes. If I have some money and I meet somebody and we seem to be hitting it off pretty well in terms of friendship, I might be like, hey, I've actually been interested in learning some dance classes, like break dance and stuff like that. Would you be interested in coming along? I've never done it before, and it would be easier to have a friend who's also new at this, who might be interested in it. And if they say yeah, that's fantastic. Or other areas. I've never gone airsofting or paintball. Ask them if they want to go and do that, and see if they would be interested in doing some kind of activity like that if they've never done it before. So that's the new part. Something borrowed. This kind of goes back to movies, but it can also go to games and books and stuff like that. A book series that I've really enjoyed growing up was the Legend of Drizzt series by R.A. Salvatore. And if I meet somebody playing D&D, I might be like, hey, have you heard of this series? It's owned by Wizards of the Coast. You like D&D, you might really like this. If they've never read it before, be like, yeah, here, you can borrow the first book and whatnot, and tell me what you think. Then ideally they would go ahead and offer the same thing to you. They might be really into a book series that you've never heard of before, and you borrow their book and you read it. Or a movie or anything like that. And then something blue. This goes back to how I mentioned, opening up. Something blue does not mean something physically blue. It means something sad. In this context, and it's share information that is a little bit personal, and whatnot. You don't want to go too personal too quick, because you don't know. In the early stages, you're still working on building up that trust. And in the early stages, it's very easy to be manipulated by individuals who are bad actors, who either want something from you or want to, or are genuinely just, bad people. Those bad people do exist. Evil people do exist. There are some people out there who they just live to start drama and to use things against people because they find it funny. So keep in mind, you gotta open yourself up to potentially being attacked, potentially being used, but you don't open yourself all the way up. You have barriers in place for a reason, and that is for self-preservation. Only drop those barriers down as you slowly build out that rapport. Keep in mind, worst case scenario, you can always, be like, what, turns out this isn't working, and you break up with that friend. And you move on and you find a new one. But hurts for a couple days, but you know what? It might be just the best idea for you if it turns out that the person is crazy or, doesn't take you seriously or makes fun of your like most personal secrets or anything like that. You don't want somebody like that. You want somebody who can poke fun at you and might poke fun at some of your personal secrets, but they don't do it in a malicious manner. They do it in like a playful manner to, maybe even ease some of the tension, let you know that embarrassing thing that happened to you, it's really not that big of a deal. Don't let it, bother you too much. Um, so, but yeah, you want to, open up, tell them something sad, and assuming that everything's going well, they'll be responsive and they'll be like, dude, that sucks. If you need to talk about it, you can totally talk about it, kind of thing. You're starting that relationship with them. So once you've that would be the wooing stage. You've introduced yourself, you've done some small talk, they seem receptive. You're now in the wooing stage where you're talking about your interests, you're sharing your books or your your video games, stuff like that. You're going out and doing stuff. That's like the wooing stages. You're going on dates with your friend. So then comes kind of the more leap kind of thing. This isn't where you make it official, where you're like, this is my best friend, but you start like actively pushing towards that deeper friendship. This is where you might invite them on a camping trip or on a hunting trip, invite them to go out fishing. Some sort of long-term stay where you can interact with them more often. Invite them over for an all-nighter playing Call of Duty or, over for a long D&D session and stuff like that. Horror movie marathon, things like that. You want to try to get to the point where, they would be willing to put the relationship first. Obviously, friendships aren't the same thing as like a romantic relationship, so there might be other competing things, but you want to try to schedule out something where either for a weekend or at least just for an overnighter, they'll be hanging out with you and stuff. And that's kind of where if you can kind of get that going, then you're basically the rest of it just tends to fall in place. Once you've hit that stage, it's kind of on its own runaway train. The only thing you have to do is make sure you're checking in. Because that could be those events could be spread out. It could be like 3 times a year because everybody's got busy schedules. But you want to check in, ideally, somewhere between once to twice a week. Just to make sure that 1, they're doing okay, and 2, kind of keep the relationship going. With the train analogy, keeping this friendship train going. This is real fucking awkward. But with that train analogy, checking in is like shoveling the coal into the engine just to make sure that it stays running. There could be long moments where you actually have time to spend with them. But if you can't always see them like every week or something like that, send them a text and be like, hey, just checking in. You mentioned that your mom was dealing with cancer. Just wanted to make sure that everything was going well on that front because you said she was doing all right. And they should be checking in with you. Don't always be the one who initiates it, but at least once a week, make sure that you are in contact with them. Do not constantly send good morning texts. It's fucking cringe. I used to do that. I think about it and I hate myself for it. You don't need to try to keep them updated on every single aspect of your life. You do not need to know every little aspect on their life. When you do have those times where you can actually sit down and, over a beer and just talk for a while, you want them to go out and do their own thing so that way they can come back with stories that you haven't heard yet. Same thing with you. You want to go out and do things without them so that way you can come back and share those stories. But basically, once you start getting into those situations where, you can totally go hunting with this guy, you can go and, invite them over and you guys can, drink beer and play Call of Duty in a LAN party and stuff, which is absolutely hilarious. once you get to that point, then you're basically on track to, eventually making it official, and you start introducing him as like, hey, this is Phil. He's my best friend. I've known him for, a year, but we seem to do all right together. And, this is the guy who had asked to bury a body with me, if I needed it. So that's the kind of point that you're wanting to get to. Some red flags to keep in mind. Again, there are evil people out there. If they seem to ask for a lot of favors from you, but they don't seem to give back when you ask, like if they're like, hey, I really need to move, or I need some help moving, because I got some big furniture and stuff and I don't really know anybody else, and you're like, yeah, sure, I got my truck, we'll go over and we'll help you move, kind of thing. But then you need help moving and they're like, oh, I'm busy, I can't really help you, kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that anything's bad. They could be busy, but if that happens a lot, then maybe you're being used. If you happen to own a PS5 or a really, really badass VR setup, for your room or whatever, and, they come over once a week to hang out with you, but they always seem only interested in, the things that you have. If you own a boat and, they only seem interested in hanging out with you whenever you can go out on the water, and then they seem to just kind of like leave you alone and whatnot, they're probably using you for your items. As a young kid, this was one of the areas that I struggled with, because I did make friends. I wouldn't say it was on purpose, but I did have a tendency to try to befriend people who had nicer things than me. I grew up poor. I basically had a PS2 until about 2 years before the PS3 or before the PS4 came out, as like my main game console. I didn't get a PS3 until after I got out of high school and got my first job. It was the very first thing that I purchased. I saved up money for a PS3 because I'd always wanted one. So you want to make sure that you're not befriending people that were like me, who only wanted to be friends with you because you had nice things. I don't do that anymore. One, if I want something, I will save up the money to get it. I don't need your stuff. And two, I've learned, from being a kid, that friendship with somebody for friendship's sake is far more rewarding than friendship with somebody because they happen to own a PS5. Especially because cross-platform play means that I don't even actually need to get the specific console in order to, play online games with some of my friends who happen to have PS5s. It still works fine, So you want to keep in mind that there are going to be people who use you for services, or they use you because you have things that they want to use, and you are the easiest way to get to it without them having to shell out money or anything. You also want to be careful when they ask for money. You want to make sure that you don't give out money to people that you just met. Don't meet somebody, you go to the D&D meetup and whatnot, and then you hit it off with somebody. They seem really, really nice. They're really, really friendly. They're very receptive. And then literally that weekend, they're like, hey, hey buddy, I need $500 to make sure that I can pay rent. I can totally pay you back, kind of thing. You are being scammed at that point. Nobody should be ever asking money, especially high amounts of money, from you that you just met. Obviously, as you build up that rapport, there might be times when, you might need to borrow money from somebody, or they might need to borrow money from you. It should never be high amounts, and there should be some level of trust that's already built before you just go ahead and give them money. So always be mindful that when you're putting yourself out there, there are dangers that you might come across in trying to make friends. You are going to make mistakes. You're going to accidentally come across a psychopath or sociopath. They're very well disguised. They'll seem like they're genuine, and then, they'll just use you, and they'll, toss you to the curb once you're no longer useful to them. You're going to make mistakes in the types of people that you meet, but ideally over time, you will have developed a sense of the type of people that you're looking for, and you'll learn to look out for the types of people that screw you over. Similar with dating and stuff like that. If you want to meet that special somebody that you want to spend the rest of your life with, you got to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to talk to those that you're interested in, and you have to be willing to get rejected. Over time, you will start to notice what you do wrong that, decreases your chances of success, and you will learn the types of people that you want to avoid. You're going to start those friendships, those relationships with people who are going to hurt you, and you're going to learn how to avoid those specific people. But you have to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to get hurt. And believe me, the benefits of having a very close friendship just totally outweigh the possibility of losing $500 or, having, a day where you invite people over to your birthday party and nobody shows up. So that is my talk and advice on making friends. I went ahead and did this one before where I was trying to film myself, but I didn't really like how the whole thing came off, so I went ahead and re-recorded this. If you find this video helpful, or this podcast helpful, and you think it might be helpful to somebody else who might be struggling with making friends, by all means, share this with them. It's the way that podcasts grow, is through sharing and word of mouth. So you can definitely help me out by sharing this episode or any of my previous episodes with anybody else. You can find this podcast on any of the major podcasting platforms, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, all of those. I will also have this on Rumble and on YouTube. Again, I tried to do a video version of this, but I didn't know exactly what I was doing, so I figured go with the tried and true method, focus on making the content first, and then we'll try again with making videos once I'm a little bit more aware of what I'm doing. And then, of course, you can also follow me on Twitter. I share a poem every day that I have read. I still need to share the one for this day as of recording, and then I will also be sharing poems that I write once a week. This goes back to the previous podcast episode, episode number 5, talking about why you need poetry. Highly recommend that you check that one out. Didn't seem to be very popular, but you know what? I actually think that's one of my better ones. So, but anyway, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me talk and ramble for a little bit about friendship. I hope that I was able to offer some helpful advice. And I hope that you guys can go out and start making your new best friends, who you know for sure that if you were stuck in a foxhole with them, there wouldn't be anywhere else you'd rather be. And you guys can take on the world. A little bit cheesy, a little bit soppy, but you know what? Friendship's incredibly important, and it seems to be like one of the biggest areas that men are struggling with. So I hope you guys can find your best friends. I'm hoping that this advice works out for me after my move, because I'm definitely going to need to start building out that social circle again. Thanks for hanging out, and I will talk to you all in the next one. Take care.